hopefully we'll understand why you can't be awake without knowing about it. What is the occult? When I use the term occult, what do I mean? The word occult is derived in its etymology, where it comes from the Latin occultus. The Latin adjective occultus means hidden from sight, not easily seen. All right? And that adjective comes from the Latin verb occultare. Occultare means to hide, to conceal, or to keep secret. Now, both of those words in Latin are in turn derived from another Latin word, the Latin noun oculus. Oculus means eye. Okay, so we can see right away this is all about relating to the vision, relating to what we can see and what we cannot see. And that's why I use the symbol of the all-seeing eye as the main symbol for this presentation in my title card. All right? So what we're talking about here is information that is hidden from people's sight, and it is held by very few people in the world, which are represented by the apex of this pyramidal structure here, okay? That's where knowledge is concentrated and condensed and held very tightly to the chest by some individuals. And then down here, you have the ignorant masses of humanity who have no idea about the occult at all. Zero. Okay? And they're down here in this compartmentalized and hierarchical structure in complete ignorance. Ignorance is the base of the structure. It's ultimately what's holding the people who are up here, holding that knowledge to themselves in power. All right? So keep in mind, the occult simply means always has meant, means now, and always will mean nothing but hidden knowledge. That's all it means. It does not mean evil, it does not mean bad, it does not mean superstitious, it does not mean voodoo, or any other particular practice that people associate with the occult. All it means is hidden. So I'm trying to demystify the concept of what the occult is. Now, that having been said, what is that knowledge? What comprises occult knowledge? What knowledge are we talking about if we're talking about hidden knowledge? Well, occultism comprises and hides two main bodies of knowledge. These have been called arcana, which means knowledge, okay? The minor or lesser arcana, and it should not be seen as lesser in significance. It's just a term for it because it describes the smaller things, okay? The microcosmic or the inner world of the personality, the individuated consciousness, all right? It's knowledge of the self, knowledge of how we work, how we operate, how our minds work, how our motivations work, etc. All right? It's knowledge about the human psyche and how it works. That is the first main body of occult knowledge, and we'll be getting into this today. We'll be getting into both these bodies of knowledge today as I step through the points. The second body is the major or greater arcana, or the macrocosmic world of knowledge, the knowledge of the greater world, okay? The so-called outer world. This is knowledge about how the laws of nature operate. All right? Knowledge about how not only the physical laws of nature, but the laws of nature that govern behavior, which we're going to be talking a lot about today. All right? So that is what the occult comprises. And whenever I show people this slide, I ask people, what knowledge is not contained in those two groups that is of any significance to our lives? All knowledge is contained there, okay, of any true import. And that's why it is hidden. The powers that should not be in our world want people to remain in ignorance of how these two bodies of knowledge work, because that can be converted to a power differential. And that's exactly what is done by dark occultists. Again, we have to understand, this information is not one thing. People who see the occult as something that is unidimensional don't get the whole picture. All right? There are dark occultists and there are light occultists. And in this time and age, I would suggest that all true light occultists, I apologize for that, folks. All true light occultists are de-occultists. Okay? What I mean by that is anybody who has the knowledge of the occult today is trying to break it out onto the world if they are true light occultists. They are not hiding it anymore. They realize the importance of sharing it openly and widely at the time we're living in, because we're out of time. Okay? So I consider myself not only a light occultist, but a de-occultist, as we'll get to. But dark occultists, the powers that should not be in our world, have deliberately hidden this knowledge. That's why they hide it. All right? They've deliberately hidden it in order to create and maintain a power differential over others. Okay? A power differential between themselves, those who hold that knowledge, and the ignorant masses of humanity who are lacking that knowledge. A differential in knowledge can be converted to a differential in power in our world. Now, conversely, light occultists have hidden occult knowledge at different times and places for different reasons. And there are some valid reasons for the occultation of such knowledge. I don't think that that's valid in today's time, but in the past it was important for them to do such things because they could have been absolutely eradicated, murdered in horrific ways. And not only just that, the information would have been lost in addition to them being destroyed physically. So they've hidden it in the past to prevent its complete eradication during exceedingly draconian times in the past. And at other times, they've hidden it to prevent that knowledge from falling into the hands of dark occultists who would have used it for purely selfish motives. All right? I don't think that's the time that we're living in. We have the opportunity to bring this knowledge forward, and it is our responsibility to do so at this time. So, again, this unidimensional perspective about occult knowledge has to go. People have to get over thinking about this as something that is just bad. All right, there are two sides to it. It's a tool, like a knife is a tool. So that person in that image, they're slicing up some vegetables to make a salad. That knife is being used to promote human health. It's being used to uplift consciousness. Okay, that person, you know, if they were of the consciousness to do such a thing, could take that knife and stab the person next to them for no reason, you know? So it's just a tool. It can be used for good. It can be used for evil. It depends on the consciousness of the wielder of the tool that determines how it is being used. And we have to see occult knowledge in that more grown-up adult perspective instead of this one-dimensional perspective far too many people still see it from. So that's the first point of what it means to truly be awake. You understand what the occult is. You understand why it's important, and more importantly than that, you understand why it has been hidden and how it is being used in the world, how that knowledge is being used in the world today. Point number 2, being awake means knowing that the truth is singular, eternal, and objective, and that truth exists completely independently of our perception of it. And this is something that is completely different than many New Age takes on what it means to be in touch with truth, because they don't see it as something that is singular or objective. And it's extremely important to understand. So, what is truth? You know, whenever you bring up this topic to the average person, we'll say, well, what's truth anyway? And again, just like I tried to demystify the concept of the occult, I really want to try to demystify this concept of truth, because too many people have a completely mystified notion of what truth is. It's way over the top, it's way too complicated, and it doesn't really capture what truth means. All right? We have to simplify. First thing is, truth is simple. It's not complex. It's not overly mystified. It's very simple. It's something that is objective, meaning that it is not based on the perceptions of human beings. It's not based on thought. Truth is not based on how we think. It's not based on how we feel, period. It's not based on our perceptions. It exists independently of our perceptions. All right? Human perception is capable of wavering wildly off the course of truth. Truth does not waver. Truth stays right where it is, regardless of whether you recognize or perceive it or not. It is simply that which is. It's always been there. Like I said, it's always been there. It's always going to be there. It is there now. It is simply that which is. It is that which has occurred and is occurring. Truth is that which has occurred in the past and is occurring right now in the present moment. And that's it. That's all that it is. Very demystified conceptualization of truth, which is lacking in a lot of spiritual studies. All right, people want to make it the totality of the knowledge of the mind of God. You know, it's too mystified of a concept, and it's also too complexified. You'll never get to the essence of what it really means with that kind of a concept in your mind. Most people will say, "Well, if that's what it is, why bother?" We'll never get to that, you know, and that's what stops people from moving forward in pursuit of truth in many cases. So keep this demystified concept in mind as we move forward. The second part of truth is that it is singular. There is no such thing as my truth, his truth, her truth, their truth. There is only the truth. There is only one way that things have been and actually are now. Okay? The past cannot be changed. It's what was. That's what led to the present, what is. That's not up for interpretation. That's what has occurred. Okay? There's only one way that happened, because it's already done. It is the past. All right? So there's only one way that things actually are. We could either align our perceptions to it, or we could not align our perceptions to it. Period. All right? And that exists independently from perception. It's a very hard thing for the ego to hear. I recognize that. This is one of the main points of contention that many people will take up with my work as well. But let me see if I could explain how truth is different than perception. Okay? This is a real simple model, this graph. Okay? And I try to keep my graphics as simple as possible as well. If you look at these white lines here as just being a simple representation or a model of truth, which does not waver, which is just the way things are, the actual truth of the matter, okay? And then you look at these waveforms in different colors as a person's perceptions, okay? And how the perception is coming into contact with truth at these points. All right? Now, this is called a low-frequency wave. A low frequency means the wave oscillates about its axis less frequently than a higher frequency wave. All right? So a low-frequency perception or consciousness is going to be in contact with truth at much lower frequency, less frequently. All right? So this wavelength of light, all right, is lower frequency than this wavelength of light. This person's consciousness, if we're likening this model to a human consciousness, would be low frequency, low consciousness. This person, their consciousness has been stepped up to a higher frequency. It is now in more alignment with truth. So the person's consciousness is intersecting with that which does not waver much more frequently, hence a higher frequency. This person's consciousness is intersecting with it at many, many, many different places along the line. If you were to take that and go to infinite frequency, you would have a line, or in other words, alignment with truth. You would be intersecting the truth at all times and places. Your perception would not waver from that which is. It would recognize that which is readily and accurately. And that's what I'm talking about by perception. And that's what determines whether consciousness is low or high, whether it is in alignment with that which is, in recognition of that which is or not. And not everybody is going to be there all the time. Even the person with very high consciousness, their perception may slip out of alignment with truth, but it will do so less frequently than other people's perception slipping out of alignment with truth. Some people live their entire lives and barely ever touch that white line at all. Okay? But the point here is that perception is not reality. What our work here on the earth is to align our perception to reality. And an ideology that makes this almost impossible, that unfortunately is on the rise and is propagated nonstop, 24 hours a day by the New Age communities in today's world, is known as Solipsism. Now, how many people have ever heard the term Solipsism before? That's phenomenal. I've never asked that question and had a room full of people, give a response like that the vast majority, about 90% of the room has heard the term. That's a good sign, actually. Maybe people are becoming aware of what this is and the danger that it's doing. Let's just look at the etymology of the word for a moment. Solipsism comes from the Latin adjective solus, meaning alone, and the Latin pronoun ipse, meaning self. So if we put them together, it's all alone by oneself. I'm the only one here, in other words. Okay, everything revolves around me. All right, it's the ideology that only one's mind is ever sure to exist. That knowledge of anything that's outside of one's mind is unsure. I can't possibly know that any objective truth exists because I'm only experiencing my consciousness subjectively. So how could anything about the external world or its workings truly be known? Or certainly even if I were to know it, how could I possibly communicate it with anybody else? That's what solipsism is, the idea that there is no such thing as truth. Truth is just totally a subjective thing that exists only in the mind. It's nothing objective. Nothing can actually be known. It's all just random perception and whims. That's all, And if that's the ideology, I would suggest you could be led to buy anything, to buy into absolutely anything, which is why dark occultists want to propagate this ideology. I mean, desperately want to propagate it. I was involved in the dark occult in my past. And I'm telling you, they themselves consider this a sin for themselves. They never, ever, ever want to fall into this ideology for themselves. So a dark occultist would communicate to other dark occultists and say, don't ever buy into solipsism, all right? But propagate it to everybody out there that you want to control. They want to propagate this ideology, not buy into it themselves. And they do it very effectively. And they're doing that through the New Age movement. Solipsism is both a false religion and a defining hallmark of spiritual infancy. This is what it means to be completely asleep, in other words, to be completely unconscious, not having started the journey in consciousness at all. So departing from this diseased ideology is a surefire sign that you're beginning to awaken. Okay? It's a surefire sign at the very beginning of human maturity and spiritual development. Those who are truly awake fully understand that objective reality absolutely does exist and that the truth absolutely can be known. Truth is knowable. The universe was not put here to torment us endlessly, such that we can never know anything and constantly be tormented by that fact. If that's your worldview, it's a diseased and poisoned worldview. Truth is here. It always has been here. And we are capable of discovering it and knowing it. Point number 3. Being awake means knowing the true self and understanding its connectedness to everything. Now, the notion of connectedness to everything or universal oneness, that's something I do happen to share with communities like the New Age movement. We are all one. That doesn't mean there's not individuated units of consciousness that are experiencing themselves in physical form, It doesn't mean I could do whatever I want to someone else's body. My boundaries have to be respected. Other people's boundaries have to be respected. But essentially, in our situation and in consciousness, we are one. It doesn't mean there aren't different levels of consciousness either. You have to understand, while yes, we are all in this situation together, different people are at different levels of perception. So let's look at what consciousness means. To know the self, you have to understand what it means to be conscious. All right, so consciousness is our ability. When we say he's conscious of that, this person has a high level of consciousness. This person isn't conscious. They have a low level of consciousness. What do we mean by consciousness? And again, We have to demystify the concept because there's too many way out there notions of what consciousness is all about. It's actually quite simple and demystified. Okay? It is the ability of a being to recognize patterns and meaning with respect to those patterns that are taking place, both within the self, within their own individuated consciousness or self, and in the realm in which the self is operating, the environment that they're in. Okay? Very simple definition. So consciousness is awareness. It is the ability to accurately align your perception to what is, to see the pattern, to see the meaning in the events that are taking place. And again, that's valid for both the inner world of the self and the so-called outer world. Consciousness's expressions are threefold. If you really think about it, there's only three ways you can express yourself, that your consciousness can express to other people. All right? It's through our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions. And you could say words, but I would suggest that words are a form of action. You're doing something, and you're communicating with other people, and that's an expression of your thoughts and emotions as an extension. So thoughts, emotions, and actions. This is the triune aspects of consciousness, or self. Okay, we are three in one. We are a three-in-one being. And these are the three aspects of the self. It has been called mind, body, spirit. Mind, spirit, body. Okay? The thoughts, of course, are the mind. All right? That's a singular, non-dualistic expression. All right? The body we can look at as masculine. It's what we perform action with, the masculine component of consciousness, doing something in the world. It's an active expression. The spirit is something that is internal. Okay, you can look at that as feminine. All right, it's within. It's what we are experiencing within ourselves, the spirit in which we perform our actions. So that's why I've put these two symbols here. This is an ancient symbol known as the blade. It's a rudimentary phallic symbol or symbol of a sword. And this is a ancient symbol known as the chalice or the womb. Again, it's an ancient depiction of either a cup or a womb. This is the masculine symbol. This is the feminine symbol. So we have a sacred feminine side, the emotions or the spirit, and we have a sacred masculine side, the body, which we perform our actions with. And then this is, you can look at as the creative essence which drives both of these things. Okay, so that's the expressions of consciousness. Okay, moving forward to help people to understand what is the true self, we have to understand a little bit about the physiology of the brain. And I won't make this too complicated, I'll move through it rather quickly. We basically have three complexes in the human brain. We have the R complex of the brain, which is down here, highlighted in red. This is the reptile brain, the reptilian brain. It's the brain stem and the cerebellum. This regulates motor function, respiration, survival mechanisms, instinctual responses, the things that we have to do to interact with the physical world around us. Then we have the midbrain. It's known as the limbic system or the mammalian brain, the mammal brain. And it facilitates and makes possible emotional responses in the body. So this generates the chemicals, the neuropeptides that help us, that go into our bloodstream and nervous system that help us feel, okay, when we take an action or have a thought. And then there is the higher brain. This is the part of the brain that is actually the most important and the most important to keep in balance and health, because it's called the neocortex, which means the new brain, okay? It facilitates all human higher order thought and separates us from the animal kingdom in that regard, okay? It makes logic, scientific, mathematical thought possible. It also makes intuition, creativity, artistic, holistic, compassionate thought possible. The neocortex of the brain has two hemispheres. The left brain hemisphere, right here, largely facilitates logical and scientific thought. And again, I say largely. This is a generalized model. It doesn't mean any time you're in logical or scientific thought, only the left brain is active. That would be an oversimplification. Okay? So again, keep in mind, this is just a simplified model of neuroscience. It's not the be-all and end-all of it. Okay? So the left brain facilitates logical and scientific thought, while the right brain here facilitates creativity and compassion, emotion, intuition, etc. So what happens if we're only living in our left brains? If we're chronically engaged in the logical, scientific, mathematical, linear type thought, and never really turning on the creative, intuitive, or compassionate thought that is facilitated by the right brain hemisphere? Well, something happens. The whole neocortex starts to become destabilized because it's not in a state of balance. So if a human being's left brain hemisphere becomes chronically dominant, the R complex of the whole brain construct, right, will take over the executive function of the whole brain that is intended to be controlled by the higher brain, the human brain, the neocortex. Emotions will become suppressed because the right brain isn't working, and the limbic system will not work as effectively, and the person will become ruled by total selfishness and base desires, and they will develop a personality that is based in domination and control. Now, I call that master think, because again, the powers that should not be, the controllers of this world, want a world of masters and slaves. Okay, they want those dynamics to play off against each other. So they want a lot of people in left brain imbalance, and they want a lot of people in right brain imbalance. That's how they can have a world of slavery. All right? What happens if the opposite is true? What happens if we're always living in the right brain and we never engage the logical processor, okay, that filters information and weeds out logical inconsistencies? Well, what we'll get is the opposite modality of thought. We'll get what I call slave think. If a human being's right brain hemisphere becomes chronically dominant, the limbic system will take over executive function of the brain instead of the neocortex. Okay, because the neocortex is imbalanced, so it reroutes or shunts executive function to another construct of the brain, in this case the midbrain, which controls emotions. The R complex will basically shut down. That's what controls our instinct and survival mechanisms, our fight and flight response. Defense and survival instincts will become suppressed, and the person will be ruled by their emotions and develop a personality based in submissiveness and naivete, characteristics of religious thought, and particularly New Age thought. Okay? Laying down to control, laying down to domination, what I call slave think. If both brain hemispheres are in balance, okay, what develops is what I called free think. Okay? When they're in balance, the neocortex operates in its proper role as the executive command center of the whole brain. And that's where true intelligence is born. And when I say true intelligence, if you just break down the word intelligence, people in the Western world in particular think intelligence is equated with intellect. It is not. Intellect is not intelligence. Intellect is half of intelligence. The other half is the generative capacity. That's why it's called intelligence. Intella is intellect. Gens is the generative capacity of the brain, or in other words, the creative capacity. The word generare in Latin as a verb means to create. So the creative capacity of the brain is the right brain, what the right brain hemisphere makes possible. Intellect is largely facilitated through the left brain. Left brain intellect is not intelligence. So when I say to people, scientists in many cases don't have a drop of intelligence. They look at me like that's a weird thing to say, but it's absolutely true. Because most scientists are totally trapped in the left brain intellect and don't have the right brain creative capacities turned on at all. So that's not real intelligence. That's not holistic intelligence. There's no balance in that. Okay? So the balance is what this is all about. Intellect, which is very important, okay, logical processing, plus intuition, creativity, and compassion, which is about the heart. Okay? That's real intelligence. Unfortunately, most of humanity is trapped in what I call the mental schism, where they're totally imbalanced toward one brain hemisphere or another, and that imbalance dynamic is held in place through mind control. The intellect, the masculine component of consciousness, if that's way too overused and we're always living in that state of imbalance, if that part of the personality or that part of the brain is chronically dominant, then what manifests are conditions like rigid skepticism, not taking in any new information or evidence, okay? What I call scientism. This is the worship of science as a religion, as the only possible medium for truth to be known, okay? Atheism, solipsism, moral relativism, which we're going to talk a lot about later, social Darwinism, eugenics, and authoritarianism. And then if we're in total right brain imbalance toward the feminine hemisphere of the brain, if that part of the brain is chronically dominant and we have no balance with the left brain as well, will manifest conditions in the personality such as total naivete, blind belief, religious extremism, just being a blind follower or believer. Solipsism can also manifest when you're in right brain imbalance, just as left brain imbalance. Unworthiness, self-loathing, addictive personalities fall into this category of the brain as well. And then perhaps most dangerous, following orders and being a willing slave, not resisting when there's dominance that is being exerted over you by others. So this knowing the true self is about getting out of those mental schisms. You're not in one of those forms of imbalance or the other. You're in holistic thought, or what I call free think. What will also keep you in a state of being able to be controlled and not knowing the true self is a worldview schism. And again, too many people are in one of these sides or another as well. The worldview of randomness, that everything is just a cosmic accident. The universe is a grand accident. There's no creator. There's no underlying intelligence in nature. Okay? Everything was just a cosmic accident for no purpose. There's no such thing as the spirit. There's no such thing as morals that are true, that are objective. There's no such thing as natural law, which we're going to talk about a lot. There's no purpose to existence other than to continue to exist. Survival. What does that sound like? Somebody who's rooted in the R complex of the brain because of their left brain hemispherical imbalance. Hallmarks of scientism, hallmarks of atheism, hallmarks of totalitarianism. The opposite form of worldview schism imbalance is determinism. This is where you have extreme religionist thought. God controls everything in creation. Nothing happens unless God wills it to happen. All occurrences are ultimately preordained. Free will doesn't exist. That's an illusion. God controls everything. Since God controls everything, hey, why bother trying to change anything? Your will is not going to be done. The Creator's will only is going to be done. So no change can really be brought about. Action, therefore, is meaningless in this worldview. And these are hallmarks of religious extremism and what I call slave think. People who believe it's just always been this way, it is this way now, it's always going to be this way, accept your chains. Very, very, very dangerous line of thought, just as the left brain imbalance and worldview is just as dangerous. The truth lies in the balance point, in the middle. Knowing, and this is part of knowing who we are, because we are part of this universe and how it works, okay? There is a deterministic component to reality, and that is what I term natural law. The laws of nature are determined. They are set in stone, unwavering, and all you can do is discover them and align your behavior to them or not. That's the determined component of reality. You're not going to change that. That's what is. Then there's a free will component, or what would be called a random component. So there's a randomness side to reality, and there's a deterministic side to reality. Knowing that both of those are present brings us into a state of balance when it comes to worldview. So natural law is operating at all times and places, but so is free will. That is so utterly important to keep in mind. It's actually one of my upcoming points. Okay, So what is the true self then? The true self, knowing who we really are. If we're in that state of consciousness, we will understand and respect self-ownership. We're going to be talking a lot about self-ownership today also. We will respect our own sovereignty. We will know our own sovereignty as a absolute, unwavering truth of reality. And we will also know everyone else's sovereignty. The entire room here today is full of sovereigns. Every individual in this room is a sovereign entity, period. And you'll know what I mean when I break down the word sovereign. The true self understands natural law. And that's another component to awakening, which we'll get to. And they strive to live in harmony with it at all times and places. The true self understands what real non-dualism is. Again, not this new agey variant of what they think of as duality or non-duality. Okay, real non-duality is about alignment with your thoughts, emotions, and actions. It means you're not in dualism. As you think, so you feel, so you act. The Trinity is one. The three are in one. Thought, emotion, and action, there's no contradiction between them. Again, that's what coming into the true self is about. As you think, so you feel, and then so you behave. Your behaviors are not in contradiction to what you say you know or how you say you feel. You actually do in alignment with how you know and how you say you feel. Okay? So, understanding true non-dualism is part of being in connection with the true self. Non-contradiction in thought, emotion, and action. The true self understands, espouses, and works toward true freedom. You understand, if you're connected with the true self, you understand that the goal of everything is freedom. That's the goal. The goal is not to be enslaved anymore, to end enslavement. So that we ultimately can direct our future evolutionary development in consciousness. Okay? And we're not being held back from doing that. That's what, by definition, slavery is doing. And we are in that condition of slavery right now. To be connected with the true self means that our worldview will reflect an understanding that there is no true separation between ourselves and others. Again, that we are truly one at a unified level of existence. It doesn't mean that, I have the same hand or arm as somebody else, of course. You're going to respect people's physical boundaries in the physical domain, but you understand ultimately that we are one consciousness that is having an experience here in the physical domain. The true self doesn't exist in a mental schism or ego identification, which I'll be getting to. It seeks to break down institutionalized belief systems that hold back the progress of consciousness, which we'll also be talking about. And it is concerned with the alleviation of suffering for all beings, for all consciousness, not just the alleviation of suffering for oneself. How does this differ with the false self, the notion of the ego entrenched illusion that many people are trapped in? Someone who's trapped in ego, identified with the false self, the flesh only, okay, doesn't understand self-ownership or sovereignty at all, and doesn't really care about it either. They don't understand natural law at all or care about it. Their behavior is in opposition or duality, okay? They live in perpetual dualism, perpetual contradiction between their thoughts, emotions, and actions. They will constantly do things that are in contradiction with what they say they know and how they say they feel. They can't even envision true freedom. Forget even asking them what freedom is or means. They have no conception of it whatsoever. They don't care about it. They don't care whether slavery is present. Okay? And in many cases, they're people who are just seeking more and more control because they're in super left brain dominance. They're completely attached to a false worldview of separation, that everything is separate and it's us versus nature. We're not part of it, a holistic part of it. They exist in mental schism, as we've already talked about, and ego identification, which we'll get to. They accept and reinforce almost all the institutionalized belief systems here on the earth that hold back the progress of consciousness. And they are totally unconcerned with the suffering of others. You know, in many cases, they're so destroyed and imbalanced, they don't even care about their own suffering anymore. You know, they just look at that as, oh, that's inevitable, and why not just create some more of it, you know, and self-inflict it. So they think only about themselves, maybe their own, you know, their extended family or whatever, maybe, and could care less about whether the world is in total bondage and total suffering or not. Part of understanding the true self is knowing what human nature is really about. And again, this is another big point of contention with my work with a lot of people, because so many people are attached toward believing that human nature is one way or another. When I get up here and tell people human nature is neither good nor bad, okay, human nature is that we are beings that are capable of being programmed. We have a programmable nature like a computer has a programmable nature. Please note, I did not say that human beings are computers, because I do not believe that. Okay? We have a nature that is similar to a computer in that it can be programmed to output a certain mode of behavior. Okay? Human beings are programmable, much like computers. Like a computer, if a human being has a bad hard drive format, that's the first thing you do when you get a computer. You format the hard drive. You're laying the file system into the drive to prepare it to receive an operating system. Okay? That's what is the conditions that are like a child's formative years. Why do you think it's called the formative years? A format's being laid down. And they just accept everything in the first 6 years of development. That's why a child's formative years are so crucially important to the being they're going to become. Okay? If a computer has a bad operating system, a lot of people out there are running computers with bad or infected operating systems. Well, do they compute really well? Not too well. You know, they don't present the desired output onto the screen or onto the printer or onto the internet. And that operating system is the culture we're living in, the system in which we are operating. And that system is corrupted. It's running viruses all over the place. Okay? If a human being has bad software programs installed that are buggy, all the code is buggy. Okay, it's not based in truth. It's bad code. Well, what happens when you run a piece of software that is totally buggy? It crashes. It spits out horrible output. Okay? And that's like our belief systems. Are they in alignment with truth, or are they completely erroneous and we're holding on to them in a rigid and dogmatic way, even though they're false? Well, what's going to be output onto the screen? The output, which is human behavior, is also going to be bad if all those former things are bad. You load up a computer with all that bad stuff, you're not going to get good output on any output device you're going out to. You're going to get junk. So if the hard drive format, the conditions during the formative years, the operating system or culture, and the software programs or beliefs are bad, the output onto the screen, which we call life, the behavior, will also be bad. And it will contribute to deteriorating conditions on a mass scale. Like a computer, the behavior of a human being will largely depend upon its programming, the quality of the information that has been put into it, which enables it to process and create efficiently. So if garbage goes in, garbage comes out. If quality goes in, quality comes out. That is how our nature works. We are programmable. We are the programmer as well. We can change the code. See, that's where free will comes into the picture. We are not at the mercy. This does not mean you are at the mercy of your environment. We can decide what goes into us through diet, through what we are going to pay attention to, or consider, or take into our mental selves. Okay? So that's actually highly encouraging when it comes to the development of the self and knowing the self, that we are in control of that process. It's not just something that is being done to us. Next point, being awake means knowing that there are both spiritual and physical realities, neither of which take precedence over the other. Again, a point of balance needs to be understood and struck when it comes to this. This is what real non-duality when it comes to the whole universe is all about, the non-duality of spirit and matter. Again, you have scientific materialists that are talking about the primacy of matter and how it's so ultimately important and that there's no such thing as spirit. And then you have religious groups or New Agers talking about spirit is all that matters. This world doesn't matter. It's an illusion, and spirit is of primacy. Well, these are both left brain and right brain imbalanced worldviews. There's no balance in either one of those perspectives. It's not being awake. Being awake means spirit in the flesh. Go back to that theme, okay? Spirit in the flesh. We are spiritual beings, but we are also material beings, having an experience in the material domain. So what is that right there? Is that the physical world or is that the spiritual world? Well, guess what? Newsflash, folks, it's both. It's both. It's one thing. Okay? So this dichotomy between spirit and matter needs to go. It needs to merge. It's just one thing. It's everything. Okay? Spirit isn't superior to matter. Matter isn't superior to spirit. They're both the same thing. Where do we even get into this notion that they're separate? How could they be separate? Okay? Well, yes, the physical matter, you look at this under high enough magnification, it would look like disorganized chaos and random motion of particles. Hey, I get it. I understand the whole quantum reality, you know. While at some level, at the ultimate level, the unified field level, yeah, this material world isn't solid at all, okay? We could look at matter as an illusion in that regard if you want. That's fine to look at it as an illusion in that regard. But that doesn't mean that you dismiss what happens here, okay? Because what happens here is of significance and importance. Why is that? Because the experience that is being gained and learned from so that the consciousness of the all can learn and grow is very real. So it doesn't mean because you understand that at the ultimate level things are an illusion. The physical material realm is illusory at some level. It doesn't mean you don't act. It doesn't mean that you dismiss the importance of what happens in the physical realm. No, because the experience that is being gained in the physical realm is real. And if that experience is ongoing suffering and slavery, that should be changed. That should be ended. You know, there is a difference between something that is good and something that is bad. It's not just an experience. It's an experience that we have a say in. Okay? What happens here does matter. It does matter. Spirit in the flesh, head in the stars, feet on the earth. Okay? Being awake means being out of ego identification and ego attachment. So, what are these things? What is the state of ego identification? This is the identifying with the role that we are playing in the world of the flesh, in the world of matter. So these are the people who think, I am my blank, fill in the blank. I am my relationships. I am my social status. I am my job. I am my profession. I am my country. Okay? Well, is that how you identify? You know, if somebody asks you, what are you? Who are you? You know, do you say, I am my job? I mean, I do the work of public presenting. I do the work of going on the radio and hosting a talk show. Am I that? I mean, for a short bio, I could describe I do these things. So I could say I'm a radio show host. But do I really think that's what I am? No, I'm consciousness, having an experience to learn and grow. That's what I am, you know. But when we identify with the roles, then we become attached to them. And that makes change very, very difficult for most people. And you got endless ones. You can go on and on. We can go on and on for days with these, Are you just your job? Are you what you do on a day-to-day basis? Are you even your thoughts? Are you the roles that you play? Are you the things, the positions that you take up in our culture, in our operating system? Many people think they are these things. They're very attached to that position. They would have no identity without those positions, in many cases. What's ego attachment about? It's really about one thing, the inability to admit that we are wrong. So we don't want to look at anything new. The ego in the New Age community is often talked about as like, I can't see myself as a distinct individual. That's not what being in ego means. Okay? If I don't see myself as a distinct individual, I wouldn't recognize that if I want a sip of this water, that I have to tilt it to my mouth and not someone else's mouth. Okay? That's what the ego is for, so I can operate in the physical domain. The ego is about, I know that if I want to put a laser pointer right here on this guy in this cage, I have to pick up this device and press this button. The ego makes that possible. It facilitates that, and it's not really anything more than that. It's a tool through which we can operate with the material realm. That's all. Okay? It doesn't mean the ego needs to be eradicated. It's a tool. The problem is when the ego says, I'm setting up and taking over the whole house. That's when the ego becomes a problem. Because now we're attached to it and we believe that's us. Okay? So what does the ego do? It keeps us in a mind prison. It keeps us in the dark. It keeps us in ignorance. That's what that force is. It's a force that works through fear to keep us in the dark, to keep us in ignorance. Okay? Not accepting any new information. It does this two ways. Ego attachment keeps people in fear and ignorance by holding them in two modes of thought. The first mode of thought is, I couldn't possibly be wrong about what I believe that I already know. Could not possibly be wrong about that. This is religious thought. It's also scientific dogmatic thought, rigid skepticism. See, it's both of those worldview imbalances, again. Left brain and right brain imbalance. All right? The second way that ego attachment keeps us in ignorance, the second modality of thought it keeps us in is, I don't want to know. So either I already have all the information I need and I know, and I couldn't possibly be wrong about what I say I know, or I don't want to know. Okay? Those are the two ways the ego holds us in that state of mental bondage. Ego ultimately prevents us from admitting that we were wrong about anything and from learning anything new. Now, from the level of consciousness I used to be at to the level of consciousness I'm at today, I must have had to say I was wrong about 100,000 times. Easily. And I'm sure before it's all said and done in this particular lifetime, I'll say it 100,000 more times. Next point of what it means to truly be awake. It involves exercising discernment and judgment. And these are things that the New Age community will tell you, no, that's not about what it means to be awake. Don't judge. Don't try to be discerning. Okay? Highly, highly important. So let's look at these modalities. What is discernment or judgment? It is our inherent ability to distinguish reality from illusion. Or in other words, to know the truth. It's being able to judge the difference between two or more things is what makes us say, well, this one is more in harmony with truth. And that's the path I should take. It's our navigation system. I put images of a scale here. It's how we weigh things in the balance to understand what's better. What is a better choice at this particular time and place? If you don't exercise that kind of discernment, who knows what anybody could possibly get you to believe? Your filters aren't going to be up. Okay? You're just going to be in that state like we are from infancy to 6. Okay? Just taking everything in and accepting it all. You know, like in a hypnagogic trance. And that's what the mind controllers want. They don't want that filter of judgment and discernment raised. They don't want shields up. They want your shields down. So you never really process the information coming at you to determine whether it's true or not. Telling people not to judge, quote unquote, is like telling them to shut off the processor and the virus protection software in their computer. Turn on your computer, then open up the box, go to the main board, pull out the processor. How much more are you going to be doing with that computer? Not a damn thing. On some operating systems, you turn your virus protection software off for even a couple of days, you're going to have problems. Okay? Because that's a filtration mechanism to stop bad things from getting in. Well, that's what your discernment and judgment is. Okay? Judgment and discernment are what allow us to effectively process information, filter out inaccuracies, make sense of all that information that's coming in, and then make accurate decisions regarding which course of action will lead to the betterment of our overall experience. That's the role of discernment and judgment. And that's why anybody that's telling you not to do those things is a deceiver, whether deliberately or by rote, repetition. Exercising discernment and judgment is how we diagnose problems, how we diagnose what we are currently doing wrong, so that we may arrive at knowledge about how to solve any given problem. That's how you arrive at the solution. You have to exercise discernment and judgment so you know what went wrong. Where did we make the mistake? How can we correct that? Okay? And this is true whether the problem is existing at a societal, a personal level, or at a societal level. The word diagnosis itself means by way of knowledge. It comes from the Greek language. Dia in Greek means through or by way of, by means of. Okay? And then the Greek noun gnosis means knowledge in Greek. So you put them together, through knowledge, by way of knowledge, by means of knowledge. That's how we understand what's wrong, so we know what we need to do to correct the situation. This may be the most important single slide you will ever see in your life in any presentation, right here. Because what this is doing is describing how we as human beings actually create our reality. Not in the New Age secret sense, but in the real world, feet on the ground, spirit and flesh sense. Okay? The first or baseline foundation is information. Information. Available information. This information constitutes potential knowledge that we can gather, process, eventually understand, and eventually act upon. But at this level, all it is information. Okay? In the trivium methodology, they call this the grammar step. Okay? So it's all the components that you need to assemble to make sense of anything. All right? Now, we could arrive at knowledge or not. Again, underneath knowledge on that box, it says, or lack thereof. So the opposite of assembling that information, not doing that process, not arriving at knowledge, is ignorance, in which case we build a very different reality. On top of that knowledge, we're building something else. So if that's not firm, if that's not a firm base, if it's not based in truth, you're not going to be building a solid structure that is going to be capable of standing. All right? Is our decision-making processes regarding what we have just taken in. These processes take place in the mind. That's why mind control is so important to maintaining the slavery condition that this world is in, because it's an attack on the decision-making processes. Okay? The processes that take place in the human mind, they're chosen by each individual, and they are based upon the available information. So this is the processing stage. We process the information. And when we process it, either we arrive at an accurate understanding of it, so now we are either aligning our thoughts to truth or not, okay? Or we don't understand it. We've arrived at confusion regarding what this information means on the first step, all right? Then above that, we're going to build on top of that. The third process, all right, is the behavior or the output, as we've already talked about in the human nature section. The output onto the screen of life then occurs, because each individual's behavior is, by definition, going to be based upon the quality of their decision-making processes in step 2, which were in turn based upon the quality of their available information in step 1. That's why if you want to control the output, you always control it from available information. Hence, hiding knowledge, the occult, okay? That's where the powers that should not be control the world from the level of available information. So, what then occurs? What happens? These are the 3 steps we work with: knowledge, understanding, and wisdom, or lack thereof. Again, that's grammar in the bottom step. In the trivium, this would be grammar, logic, and rhetoric. Or we can use the computer analogy. This is input, this is processing, and this is output. Okay? All of those different ways of looking at it hold true. But then there's something that happens, manifestation. The manifested reality that is the quality of our shared experience in this world. The quality of the condition which manifests in any given society is based upon the aggregate quality of behavior within that society. Aggregate quality of behavior, meaning in the totality. So, if you have the aggregate number of human beings in a society behaving morally, you will have a society that generates a result of order. If you have an aggregate amount of people in society that are behaving immorally, you will have a society that has generated chaos, slavery, tyranny, etc. And we're going to be talking about that process later. The next point of being awake. Being awake means being mentally free of all false religions. So, by definition, we have to define what is a religion then. What do I mean by the term religion? Religion as a word in English comes from the Latin language, from the verb religare, okay? And that means, the word religare in Latin means to tie back, to hold back, or to thwart from forward progress, to bind by tying up. And that's one connotation of the word religare in Latin. There is an alternative definition as well. It means to reunite with or tie back to something that has been separated. You're going and you're then taking it back in and putting it back together. That's a positive connotation of what true religion is about. First, I'm talking about false religion here. Okay? So these are the things that tie us back or hold us back from where we say we want to go. They hold us back from truth. They hold us back from forward progress in consciousness. All right? So a religion, a false religion, qualify it as such, is a system of control that is based in unchallenged dogmatic belief which holds back the progress of human consciousness. That's what a false religion is. And again, it's all about the brain, the mind in the cage, the head cage, okay? Not being able to make any progress because we're not changing our thoughts. And again, if thoughts, the processing of the information doesn't change, we can't change the output through behavior, and therefore we can't change the manifested result. So if people are attached to a religion, nothing can change, because their behavior ultimately cannot change, and therefore the manifested reality cannot change. So I'm going to piss everybody off now by attacking all religions on the planet. Every single one, even the ones you didn't think were religions. Okay? All of the cultural religions, of course, constitute religion. Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, Shintoism. You name the religion. If it's an ism, that's what I'm talking about up here in the top right-hand corner. The cultural religions. Okay? Now, I also arranged this slide with these on the right and these on the left for a reason. These are the religions that work through the right brain hemisphere. These are the religions that work through the left brain hemisphere. Okay? So we have the cultural religions, as I am going to call them. And then this is the net right here that catches anything that gets sifted, okay, that this big net here doesn't catch, right? Then we have a finer mesh net down here to catch people called the New Age movement. Okay? So they're all right brain modes of imbalance, and they're all control systems. And if you haven't figured out that this one is a control system, you might want to check out my seminar called New Age Bullshit. And that's available in the back in actually, I think, 3 different formats. But I have a 2-disc set of the seminar I just did in Asheville, North Carolina, which is my favorite version of it. Just to mention, I do have lots of DVDs in the back. If people want to check them out during lunch or afterward, feel free to do so. The left brain religions, we have politics or government, the religion of authority, the belief in authority, which we'll be talking a lot about later. And then, of course, Scientism, which I've already briefly touched on. Okay, they work through the left brain. And most people, even a lot of people here today in this room possibly, are attached to one of these religions or another. I won't ask by show of hands, okay? But more likely than not, we have some people here who are even attached to some of these religions. And they're all ultimately ruled by one overarching religion, which is the God of this world, and that is the monetary system. This is the religion that the least amount of people on the earth are out of the mental identification with. The least amount of people, therefore, it is the most powerful religion. Money is the most powerful religion operating on the planet. There is no more universally unchallenged, dogmatic belief that is operating in the human species than the belief in magical pieces of paper called money or credits on a computer screen. Okay? That is the overarching universal piece of mental bondage software operating in humanity. If you believe that money is real, you're under mind control. Okay? If you believe it has intrinsic value, you're under mind control. Okay? And you'll just think about its operation with the other religions. Every one of them. It's intimately and intricately inseparable from. Okay? They put this up as the pedestal. If you really think about what's behind this, it's that. What's behind this? It's that. What's behind this? It's that. What's behind this? Oh, it's certainly that. Okay, just go to a New Age Expo and you'll find that out real fast. Okay? They're all illusory. There is nothing real there on the screen. In these two, and even in this one, to a certain extent, okay, there are some seeds of truth. I'm not going to tell you throw out all real science. Okay, we can know a lot about the laws of nature through real science, but if you think what we laughingly call science in the world today is real science, you're kidding yourself. This is done through government-approved grant monies. That if the people here, or who's controlling here, don't want something to be discovered by science because it's going to cost them a whole lot of this doesn't discover it. That's called scientism. And I worked in that community as well, and I'm telling you that's how it works. I heard a conversation, as a quick anecdote, I supported computer systems in the hematology oncology department of the University of Pennsylvania, okay? And I heard a researcher telling one of the heads of the department in the oncology division, HEMONC, blood cancer studies, okay, in the School of Medicine. This could be a real breakthrough. There might even be a cure in this. And the person whipped their head around and said, "Don't you ever let me hear you use that word in here again, or you will be out of here on your ass." And the word was cure. Because the person said, "This gets cured, we're out of business. That's all of the grant money that's been coming into this institution for the last 30 years, and all these jobs will disappear overnight." He said, don't ever let me hear you use that word ever again, or you will be out of here looking for a job. And thought I didn't hear it because I was sitting on the other side of the cubicle working on a laptop. That's what science is, folks, in the world today. And if you don't accept that, if you don't believe that, if you don't know that that's what's going on, I don't even want to use the word belief. If you don't know that's going on, you're very naive. Okay? This is all controlled by money, obviously, you know, the collection plate money and all the money that's coming in through donations to religions. And this is ultimately controlled by money. But what I want to say is there are seeds of truth in these movements as well. I'm not going to tell you no religion doesn't have any seeds of truth if you get deep enough into the absolute esoteric core of the tradition. There are seeds of truth there. They're just covered up by the exoteric aspects of the religion, which are all there as mechanisms of control. The same could be said of the New Age movement. There are certain seeds of truth, but then they get exploited, they get blown out of proportion, you know, subtle deceptions creep into it. So that's where the filter, the discernment, the judgment mechanism is so important. So that's being out of false religions means you don't believe in or identify with any of those systems of control, of controlled belief. How do these work? I'm going to look at two particular ones, the left and right brain aspects, which I'm simply going to call government and religion. Okay? And again, the left brain side, you could look at government and scientism, and the right brain side you could look at as religion and the New Age movement. So how do these dynamics work to control people's mind? Government works through the left brain and binds the right brain out of the way. So it works through just being in control, and it takes the right brain of intuition, creativity, and compassion out of the picture. It is based upon the erroneous and dogmatic belief that there is such a thing as, quote, authority that is vested in certain human beings, which gives them special, quote, unquote, rights which other people do not possess. When left brain imbalance is chronic, the person eventually develops psychopathic tendencies if left unchecked, leading some people to the belief that they have a right to rule over other people through violence. And this is the condition that we are in today. The right brain religions, the cultural religions and the New Age movement religion, works through the right brain and it binds the left brain out of the way. So it works on belief and just feeling, and it binds out the logical part of the brain. And this is the part that, you know, the tagline I use for all religion is, hey, if we just give up our free will and our personal responsibility, some deity, government, guru, extraterrestrial race, or mystical force will save us from our own ignorance. Don't you know that's how it works? Right brain imbalance eventually creates blind acceptance and collectivist groupthink, leading to a condition in which willing followers, order followers, will readily submit to authority. So that's what right brain imbalance does. That's why religion is such an important mind-control dialectic. Now, you put both of these dialectics together. Dialectics just means providing a choice to get you to the same place. That's all it is. It's a construct of the mind that says, give people a false choice. Okay? Well, you know, do you want to believe in materialistic, Darwinistic scientism, or do you want to believe in, you know, whatever is the religious flavor of the day? Okay? Because they're both just a choice that gets you to the same place. Control. Okay? It doesn't ever lead to freedom. That's not one of the choices in the dialectic. What happens when we have both of these things operating? When you have both of these things operating, and there's plenty of people out there that believe in both government and religion, you have a whole mind in chains. Now, when you put together a whole bunch of these, a whole bunch of minds in chains, and that leads to an aggregate society with a whole bunch of minds in chains and mental bondage, what kind of a society do you get? You get one that looks like this. You get a whole world in chains, which again is where we are at. And again, I hope people are at least conscious enough here to know this is where we are. You know, if you don't know that this is where we are, really go back and start with my work from the very, very beginning. But that's where the earth is at right now, in a state of total bondage, total slavery. It's just been very effectively masked and put under the guise of true freedom. I like to say we're living on a free-range animal farm. It's just a free-range farm that we're on. And being awake means understanding that, and we'll get to that. Being awake means knowing that there is no such thing as knowledge which is negative or bad, and that only willful ignorance of reality is what creates negative consequences in our world. Knowledge is never bad. Knowledge is never negative. To have knowledge is to have empowerment. That's why the dark occultists want to constantly try to hide knowledge, or to get people to not pay attention to knowledge which is important by dissuading them. Don't look into that. Here, have this distraction instead. You don't want to look into that. That's bad. Or that's unnecessary. There's nothing to that. They don't even need, their mind control techniques are so effective in today's world, they don't even need to hide the knowledge anymore. The knowledge is already out there. It's exploded onto the earth already. But most people are just completely ignoring it because they're so wrapped up in distractions. I tell people we're living in post-apocalyptic times because the apocalypse only means the great revealing, from apo in Greek, which means away from or off of, and kalyptine, a verb in Greek, which means to cover or to conceal. So to go away from concealing, from concealment or hiding, is what apocalypse actually means in English. To take away the veil, to take away the cover, and to reveal something for what it truly is. To know the truth is the apocalypse. And that's already done. The knowledge is out there. The problem is we've rejected it as an entire people, as an entire species. And once the apocalypse has happened, then there is either transformation and upliftment or ascension, or there is judgment. And not the kind of filtering in the mind. I'm talking about negative judgment by creation, by nature. Because the truth is there, it's been revealed for you to see as it is. Did you accept it? Did you change as a result for the better, or didn't you? Then you have to lie down in that bed that you made. So being awake means knowing there's no such thing as knowledge which is bad. All knowledge is empowering, and then it's how it's used. Is it going to be used for control? Is it going to be used for spiritual uplift? But ignoring the negative is always going to get you the same thing. It's always going to get you bondage. Okay? You can never ignore reality and prosper. It is an impossibility. It is a law of nature. If you ignore reality, there are negative consequences for that ignorance. You can ignore reality. You have the free will to ignore reality. But you do not have the free will to ignore reality without negative consequence. That is a natural law. And this is what people in many communities will tell you we should be doing. See no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. That's bad. Don't pay attention to that. I don't want to talk about the corruption. I don't want to talk about pedophilia, child sacrifice. I don't want to talk about, slave rings. I don't want to talk about people working for slave wages in slavery conditions. I don't want to talk about that government is slavery. I don't want to talk about that religion is mental bondage and mind control. No, don't learn about any of those things. Just try to follow your bliss, which we'll also talk about. Ignoring that which is negative because it makes you feel uncomfortable can only do one thing: get you more negativity. That's all it can do. And I don't mean just you personally. Yeah, you can run down to the tropics and ignore reality and somehow live an existence that for you is a little pocket of comfort in the individuated sense. But I'm saying the more people that ignore reality on this planet, the more the aggregate population of humanity will go into deeper and deeper bondage. And each individual that's doing that is contributing to that overall dynamic. So this is the position that means that you're completely asleep. Putting your head in the sand, not wanting to look at the negative, not wanting to look at the truth about what is in the here and now. regardless of how ugly that may be. And please note the body posture. This is like the Creator making a really awesome joke, okay? Because if you have your head in the sand, your ass is up in the air, okay? It's a beautiful thing that the body was designed, that the only way you could put your head in the sand is being bent over and ready to get it, okay? So, we do not give power away to something that is harmful simply by putting our attention upon it and becoming aware of its existence. This is a New Age deception, okay? Just becoming aware of something is empowering you. You're recognizing what's really there, so then you could take necessary precautions, or you could start doing what is required energetically to start to change it, okay? Seeing the negative for what it actually is does one thing. It creates an ability in us to steel ourselves against its harmful effects. You know, this is like diagnosing a problem. Well, you now know what the problem is. You know what you're up against. You know, you're not in ignorance anymore. Now you know what to do. Okay? We may even be able to not just see it coming and take precautionary measures, but we may even be able to avert the harmful effects altogether by starting to work to change that energetic dynamic, but only if we have the knowledge about what's wrong. So, refusing to look at critical information is the opposite of being awake. Okay? Refusing to look at critical information just because it may make you feel uncomfortable or scared because you perceive it as quote-unquote negative is willfully choosing to remain in a state of ignorance. And willfully choosing to remain in a state of ignorance is called unconsciousness. Or in other words, you're completely asleep. The next part of this dynamic of waking up to the negative is stepping out of what I call emotional mind control. Okay? Seeing the negative for what it is means you can't be under emotional mind control. Too many people are in this. They think, well, hey, if he gets up there and he makes me feel bad by telling me all these things, somehow that can't be true because it doesn't make me feel good. Well, whoever told you the truth has to make you feel good? New Agers told people that. The New Age movement puts that out there, you know? You want to just resonate with it. Oh, that made me feel really disturbed. I'm not resonating with that. That has nothing to do whether it's true or not. Okay? All that matters is whether something is true, not how it makes you feel. See, that's where the ego comes in. The ego wants to feel good. The ego wants acceptance. The ego wants to be told it's right. The ego wants comfort. It doesn't want to look at something that it's uncomfortable with hearing and say, oh yeah, that's the way it is. You know, that for many people the ego has to be really broken down over time. All right? So this is why mind controllers always want to get up there and dress up the lie. See, what I do, this is how I dress every day. I'm not coming up here in a three-piece suit. I'm coming up in the way that I dress normally. Jeans and a t-shirt. Okay? I'm coming up here, I'm going to speak to you in my normal, natural voice. I'm not going to put on some fake air about me that makes you, think of me as somebody I'm not. Okay? But, news broadcasters, they want to put the most physically attractive person up there, the most sweet, pleasing, calm tones in the voice, okay? Because they're getting ready to sell you a bunch of bull. And they want the ego to accept it readily, so it goes past the judgment filter. It goes past the discernment filter. And then it gets nested in the subconscious mind, and then you're acting on it without even understanding how it got planted there. That's how mind control works. So that newscaster can get up there and tell you all day long that 2 + 2 = 5. And she could say it in the most pleasant, sweet tones. It's still going to be a lie. And then the person who is completely enraged because, hey, there is rat poison in your drinking water, okay, that wants to tell you it just like that. Right? That's somebody who's crazy. Look, he's telling us we're being willfully, deliberately poisoned by people who are running the water supply and who direct that process? Yeah. Okay? But you don't want to hear that because that made me feel bad. And then what can I do about that? How can I actively get involved in not having that done anymore? That takes effort. That takes work. That takes action. Well, it doesn't mean that it wasn't the truth. You could feel bad about the truth all you want. It's still true. And that's all that matters. So again, with my presentation style, it doesn't make one damn bit of difference how much you didn't like something that I said. If it was true, it remains true. Believing that we are somehow in the right to willfully ignore a message of truth just because the messenger is somehow distasteful to us is a symptom of total madness. It is a symptom of mind control and insanity and unconsciousness. And this is how people want to weigh truth. They don't want to actually look at the information. They want to look at it, say, do I feel good about that? Do I like that person? Do I like his voice? Do I like his mannerisms? Well, then, hey, what he said must be true. I mean, how could there be any more logically fallacious way of thinking than that? And yet this is how many people think, unfortunately. And it's insanity.